Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness. My name is Sabby, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everyone, to Proper Madness. Today, I am being joined by Alissa Boyer. She is wonderful and truly an amazing soul. I found her through Instagram when I was trying to find a highly sensitive people community, and I will let her introduce herself and tell you a bit about her.
Thanks for having me on. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm always excited to get to share the message of what being a highly sensitive person is and how we can manage it. So it's cool that you found me through Instagram, and I just loved hearing that you were seeking an HSP community. Because that's what I wanted to create, was a place where people could go and be like, oh, I feel seen here. I feel like I'm not alone. So that is, the work that I do as a mentor for highly sensitive people, because it's a unique experience being highly sensitive in this world, and we need to do things differently. So I love getting to do this work.
Yeah, I think it's very transformative. Like anything that you share and you post, I personally always feel very seen and validated. I feel like as highly sensitive people, and you can expand on like what that is exactly. It's tough to find other people who fully understand you, because you have this like very deep understanding and very rich emotions, but also it comes with like all these other things that can be very overwhelming. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll start with what a highly sensitive person is, so anyone listening might see themselves in this. So being a highly sensitive person is a trait, and it's something that you're born with. A lot of people will think like highly sensitive person would be something that you're diagnosed with. Like there's a lot of misconceptions, but it's a trait. It's like being an introvert or an extrovert. Some people are just going to be more sensitive. And the scientific terminology for highly sensitive person is sensory processing sensitivity. So really, people who are highly sensitive are just more in tune and sensitive to the world around them. So we're going to be more sensitive to our environments. We tend to be more impacted by like bright lights or itchy fabric or smells or sounds. Like we're just taking in and absorbing so much stimuli all the time. We also tend to be very empathetic. So that's another piece of being highly sensitive. We're often that like caretaker or that friend that everyone goes to for advice, because we just have an abundance of empathy. We're really good at putting ourselves in other people's shoes. We are emotionally sensitive. So that's the other thing. People will hear highly sensitive person and you're like, oh, they just cry all the time. It's like, it's more than that. Like, yeah, we probably will be the ones who cry at a commercial or whatever. It's like part of us, but that's not the whole description. Some other things about being highly sensitive: we tend to get overwhelmed more easily and kind of get flustered. So like if you have a day where you have meetings back to back to back, you might get flustered, overwhelmed. This is because people who are highly sensitive have nervous systems that are more finely tuned. So it's actually easier for us to just kind of get thrown off and kind of more dysregulated more easily. But there's a lot of amazing things about being highly sensitive. I mean, I love it. We tend to be very intuitive. We can kind of pick up on cues and be very emotionally intelligent. So there's a lot to it. People who are listening could go to the website hsperson.com, and there's actually a self-test you can take that will help you determine if you're highly sensitive or not.
Yeah, that's how actually my therapist made me do that. I found out I was a highly sensitive person maybe 6 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's very recent.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was like, oh, cool. 31 years in. This is when I figure it out.
Well, it's interesting because like a lot of people do find out like a lot of people still don't know, and this trait was only like coined in the 1990s, like
Oh, wow.
1991. And so it's like it's been around forever, but it's just interesting because I still meet people every single day who are like, I just found out I was highly sensitive. Like it's so underknown still.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, and when you explain it to people, their assumption is, "Oh, you mean you're really sensitive to your emotions?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "No, there's like so many other things, you know." Like feeling
Mhm.
your emotions more intently, more deeply is something that I noticed. And when I went to my therapist, she made me go on hsperson.com. She's like, "Okay, like in the middle of our session, I think we were talking about trauma."
Mhm.
And, she had told me that, like, because I was diagnosed with PTSD too, and
Okay.
so I apparently she looked me in the eyes after I took the test. She was like, "The fact that you're a highly sensitive person and you've been through all this trauma and you're not, like, broken and you're you're
Ugh.
not, like, just done on the floor is amazing." She goes, "It's you're just, I think the way that I'm sure you know about this, but the way trauma impacts highly sensitive people is on a much deeper level, and it takes us a longer time to heal and move through some of those things, I think, is what
Oh
she's
my gosh.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's like actually we will be traumatized more easily and we will be more deeply impacted by it, like you said. There's this thing also, though, for highly sensitive people called differential susceptibility. And it's like so we'll be more negatively impacted,
Mm.
but we can also be more positively impacted. And like, so doing things like going to therapy or like being coached or, like doing self help stuff, like, can like really like
Yeah.
help us skyrocket. So it's kind of cool. Like it's hard, but then the possibilities are so beautiful too. So that's, like, awesome that you're doing that work with your therapist. It's so important.
It is, yeah, yeah, I didn't understand the full depths of it, of being a highly sensitive person, like, at all.
Yeah.
And then I started doing my research and I found your page and suddenly just things started lining up. And so now I've started telling the people in my life, hey, I'm a
Mhm.
highly sensitive person. Check out this article. This is like, like, hey, this is like a tidbit of like who I am and what I'm about and how I process things and um why sometimes I need much more alone time as well to like recharge because I get overstimulated. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and being able to, like, share that with the people in your life is just a game changer.
it
It
is.
helps.
How was that for you when you found out you were a highly sensitive person? Like how was that process for you? Like when did you find out and how did that happen?
So I found out, like, I think it was probably, I always forget how long it's been, 7, 8 years ago now. And it was like I was going through severe digestive issues. I was really sick. I was really chronically stressed and anxious. And I was like working with a holistic doctor helping me with these digestive issues I was dealing with. And he was talking to me about how, like, I was so impacted by emotional stress and anxiety, and that was actually impacting my gut. And so I started getting really interested in self help and like meditation and like doing things to help myself feel better. And my mom introduced me to the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, written by Dr. Elaine Aron.
Mm.
And I don't remember, like, I don't even know how my mom found that book. She just heard about it. And so I read that book in like a couple of days and it just completely blew my mind because I've always known I was very sensitive. Obviously, it's like you just, if you're sensitive, you just know it. And I always thought it was a bad thing. And I always tried to change it and hide it because I just felt like it made my life more difficult. It made me more intense. And I just thought it was a bad thing. I thought I needed to have like a thicker skin. And then I read that book and it just was like, it just felt like I felt super seen and validated. And it was like the first time I felt like a little bit of permission to just be myself. Yeah, it was like it was life-giving. And I didn't like go turn around right away and start helping highly sensitive people. Like it kind of was a process to getting to the work that I'm doing now. But yeah, it was just like true validation. It was the
Mhm.
best feeling to finally
Yeah.
feel seen.
Yeah, I think I really connected with you when I listened to one of your podcast episodes where I think you like fully told your like life story essentially
Hmm.
of what you had been through. And I was sitting there going, "What the heck?" I was like, "I feel like I've been the exact same thing." It's like a little eerie. And so that's when I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is like you're not alone in knowing that like you're a highly sensitive person." I think it's cool like the serendipity of your mom finding that book and like doing that. Yeah.
Oh, it was so meant to be. Yeah, and it's really interesting because like the more highly sensitive people I talk to, which has been like, I don't know, thousands probably. I feel like I talk about it all the time, obviously. And like my story is just like so not unique. Like I swear so many HSPs have go almost experience some sort of breaking point. A lot of HSPs have chronic health issues because of our sensitivity or go through some, big trauma or whatever, and it brings us to this like discovery of this trait. And I feel like it's for a reason that we
Yes.
kind of like learn about this because then we can kind of turn around and inform others and maybe help other people feel seen. It's just like cool because so many of us feel like we're the only ones. And then it's like, oh wait, I'm not alone at all in this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. What are as a highly sensitive person, I'm sure like every individual is very unique in what tools kind of help them in their day-to-day lives. But if someone's feeling like, oh, hey, this might be me.
Hmm.
What are some key tools or habits that are like important for people to embody and embrace as a sensitive person?
For sure. I think first and foremost, the best thing a person can do if they are like, oh, this sounds like me, is like read up on the trait, like read that book, The Highly Sensitive Person, take the quiz online, just like learn facts about it because I think being validated and like understanding like the science behind it and things like that is just really helpful to have that basis of understanding of how your system works and why it's not a bad thing. So that's like the number one thing I would say. But in terms of like tools and practices, like it's really important for us to kind of have ways that we can ground ourselves and calm ourselves when we do feel overwhelmed or overstimulated in our daily life because I think that's like one of the biggest struggles we go through is just feeling overwhelmed and then not knowing how to like calm down. So having a practice like for me for the longest time it was meditation. I would meditate for like 10 to 20 minutes every single morning. Now I'm a mom. I don't my days do not look like they used to, so I don't really always do that, but I have other practices where if I'm washing the dishes, I will like literally try to just be mindful and just be washing the dishes, just be like practicing mindfulness, I suppose, just being in the moment. Some other things that I love are EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique, where you're tapping different acupressure points. That's like a really great nervous system regulating tool that I always recommend to HSPs. Um, yeah, even just like getting out in nature, like going for a walk or journaling or just taking a bath. Like I know this sounds like the cliche self-care stuff, but it is really important. We need that space and ways to like honor ourselves and yeah, just like regulate our systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. I think I always what's the word? I can't think of the word. My brain just like blanked. Oh, I always emphasize, I think, to
Mm,
like anyone that like I coach as well, generally, not, and even if they're not an HSP, of how important it is to just take like a couple minutes throughout your day, if that, to just ground yourself before you go out into the world, because it's just
mhm.
when your nervous system is already like wonky and dysregulated, especially as a highly sensitive person, where your nervous system is a little bit more heightened. You're right. Like you really have to slow down and go, hang on, like I gotta keep an eye on myself so I can show up as my best self, to like the rest of the world. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always like would tell the HSPs that I work with like you have to put your armor on for the day. Like you have to have these practices that help you feel connected and solid because the rest of the world is not going to slow down just because we're overwhelmed and like I don't mean that in a harsh way. I mean it in an empowering way. Like it's
Mm.
just important for us to know how to take great care of ourselves so that when we inevitably feel overwhelmed or something annoying happens or whatever, like we have these ways that we can kind of like, okay, return to ourselves. And the other thing that I think is cool about being highly sensitive is like our bodies are so loud and sensitive. Like they're going to let us know if something is off. And a lot of HSPs will be like, oh, it sucks to be so sensitive. Like I always need to get a lot of sleep and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's cool because we're, we are so in tune with our bodies. Like we can't not be. And that allows us to be very self-aware and just like be able to tap into our intuition and stuff like that. So I just think we can always frame it too as like this empowering thing. Like I have to take really good care of myself, and that's a gift.
Yeah, it's especially the intuition part of it. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you're so right. Our bodies will like scream and yell if something is
Mhm.
off in
Mhm.
an environment, a situation, doesn't matter what it is, and we tend to ignore it. For some
Mhm.
reason, we're like, oh no, maybe for me personally, I'm like, maybe I have social anxiety. Maybe that's just all this is and has nothing to do with the situation. But like,
Yeah.
I feel like I think there's more like research and stuff like coming out about it, but those butterfly feelings around people,
Yeah.
sometimes that's not like a romantic spark all the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's your body's way of telling you something's not quite right. And
Yes.
yeah, and that's something I've been trying to still come to terms with. Like, how the heck do I tell the difference between, oh no, I'm just having social anxiety,
Mhm.
or something's not quite right? Like the delineation between your intuition and your own like insecurities, maybe, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that comes up a lot actually with like the HSPs I work with. Like always like, wait, how do I determine what's anxiety and what's intuition? And I think a big thing that we have to focus on is like cultivating more self-trust because a lot
Mhm.
of times a lot of highly sensitive people just don't trust themselves, and because we've kind of grown up in a society where it's like, oh, you feel too much, oh, you're too dramatic, you're so emotional, and so you kind of like learn like, oh, the way that I am naturally is wrong. Like I can't listen to myself because people are telling me I'm dramatic or people are telling me I'm too much. And so a lot of times I feel like we'll have these intuitive hits or things that we feel about a person, but then there's that part of us where it's like, no, you can't trust that because you're dramatic, remember? So it's like
Yeah.
really crazy. And I think we have to do a lot of unlearning in order to get to a place where like, oh, no, I can trust the way that I feel like because we do have that wisdom as highly sensitive people. Like we really can feel like I've definitely been able to sense when a person there's something off with a person and other people like didn't believe me, and then down the
Yeah.
road it always ends up being true, and it's like, so it's, yeah, it's crazy. But it can be really hard to trust that at first because it's like can feel foreign to
Oh
us.
my gosh, I feel even more seen and heard all of a sudden because this is my life.
Uh-huh.
I feel like with friendships and like dating situations, I guess like like relationships. Um, in the beginning, I'll always say, "So, I don't know, there's something I don't really like about this person," but then my programming is no savvy, don't push people away.
Mm.
You can't always see something wrong with someone, so I have to face
Mhm,
that. And
mhm.
then something happens down the line, and I'm like, I just wasted all this time.
Yes.
I was like, if I just listened to my body and my instincts, and like, I notice for me personally, if I don't want to share parts of my life with someone, there's probably a reason why. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Mhm.
I came into contact with a friendship like that, and then also dating. Like, I had some PTSD triggers come up, and this very kind gentleman was like, "Oh, like let's talk about." I'm like, For some reason, I don't feel safe enough to tell you, and I don't know why that
Ooh.
is." And lo and
Yeah.
behold, down the line, I was like, "Oh dear, we dodged a bullet." So like,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah, no, that's like it makes so much sense, and I think that every time we have those instincts or that intuitive hit and then we listen to it, I think we build our self-trust because then like you just had this example, it's like this happened to me, I listened and I dodged a bullet, and it's
yeah,
like I feel like that's just like we can continue doing that and validating ourselves, and like that just makes our intuition stronger. At least that's what my experience has been because it's like, oh dang, I have my own back. I know how to keep myself safe. And like sometimes we will override that intuition and it happens and we learn. But
yeah.
I just think that's such a good example that you shared. the fact that you were feeling like uncomfortable or like bad or guilty about like kind of distancing yourself, that's another thing that I see so common. And like, obviously, I've experienced it too, where we feel guilty setting a boundary or we feel guilty like not staying friends with someone when it doesn't feel right. And I think a lot of it is just like, there's tends to be like some people pleaser ingrained in us. And we kind of sometimes like attach like ourselves to being that person that's always kind and giving and whatever. And like, that's great. But also, I just find that sometimes when we stand up for ourselves, it can feel uncomfortable. And then we feel like, oh no, I'm doing something bad. But it's like,
Yeah.
no, you're actually doing something different. And it feels uncomfortable because you're not used to doing it, but like you're actually doing something great for yourself. So I
Oh,
just wanted to add that because it came to mind.
oh no, yeah, no, thank you for saying that because you're right. You're totally right. It's I think it's something we need to be reminded of all the time that like I think I don't know if you agree with this, but I think a lot of HSPs generally have a lot of people pleasing and codependency habits, unfortunately, just because we don't know any other way to cope with our
Mhm.
like heightened emotions and attachments and all that. So to rewire that way of thinking and just learning to trust yourself. I like how you said that to have your own back is
Mhm.
so like so key. I was gonna ask you, this is something I get asked a lot when I try to explain what highly sensitive people are. When I tell people I'm a highly sensitive person, they automatically, for some reason, assume I'm an introvert. Can you please
Mm.
explain the difference so people might understand?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like the majority of HSPs are introverts, but not all of them. I can't remember the exact stat. I want to say it's 70 or 80% are introverts,
Mm.
but they are different. So an introvert like is somebody who is energized by being alone and having our being in our own space versus like an extrovert gets energized by being around people and being in that type of social environment. And I think a lot of people assume like or get HSP and introvert, I don't know, confused as like because HSPs do need to have more time to be alone and decompress and just like reset and get away from the overstimulation. Um, but there are HSP extroverts out there. I know some and they're awesome. And they sometimes will tell me like, oh man, it's hard to be an HSP extrovert because I love being around people. I love like being out and doing social things, but then my battery gets drained and I like want to keep going, but I have to listen to like my highly sensitive side too. So yeah, they are different. Though there's that overlap, they are different.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that explains me for sure to a
Oh
T.
yeah.
Yeah. I have like my battery gets drained very fast. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love being around people when I'm in the mood for it. When I'm not a great person to be around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious for you, like, how has learning that you're highly sensitive been helpful for you? Like, has it, I don't know, just like, has it unlocked anything for you or changed the way you live your life or anything like that? I'm
Oh,
curious.
so many things. First, learning about it and still learning about it. I actually got that book, The Highly Sensitive Person. It's like sitting in my bookcase, and
Oh, yeah.
I haven't read it yet. I need to. Um, but for me, it made me feel better about myself, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
When I found out I was diagnosed with PTSD, it's almost like as like PTSD, I don't like saying victims, but like survivors.
Yeah.
Um, I for me, like we always tend to minimize the traumas that we have been through because of our
Mm.
emotional responses to it, and because trauma for some reason like people still assume that like certain things that happen to them in their lives aren't traumatic when they are, right? Because of the
Yeah.
stigma around it. So when I found out that I also was a highly sensitive person, it kind of made me feel like a superhero because I'm
Yeah.
going, oh my God, I went through all of that and I still somehow am like doing the work on myself. And like you said, it makes sense. Like because I'm doing the work on myself, it actually helps heal me faster and a little bit more. Like I noticed in therapy sessions, my therapist is like, wow, she's like, you just talked and you figured it out. And I'm like, I can I know I'm special, but I know that there's other people that can do that too, because of being so in tune with yourself. So finding out about it for me has validated my own past experiences and knowing that like, hey, I'm like a badass and like I
Mm-hmm.
survived all of that and I'm okay. And like other people will be okay too. And to like pass that message along to them has been wonderful too. And then like the other part of that in learning and adjusting in my life is I always have to remind myself that I'm a highly sensitive person because I forget. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and even I get confused of like, oh, am I being like sort of am I in an introvert mode now suddenly? And then I have to remind myself like, it's not always entirely that. I think I like to put myself in a box, unfortunately, to help me understand something instead of
Yeah.
realizing it's gray, you know? Um,
Yes.
so yeah, but adjusting has been interesting. Like last weekend and the weekend before, I went to two concerts in a row, which I love. For me, music is like it makes me connect to my emotions and feel deeper. It's just very euphoric for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and movies too. Like, oh gosh, I'll get like life lessons from movies. And I used to think I was so weird. I'm like, I'm like, no, guys, like I'll be around my friends watching a movie, like, you don't understand the message through the movie that was so deep and beautiful. And my friends would be like, yeah, no, that was cool. I'm like, but I feel like I'm like, no, you don't understand. So now I feel more in tune with myself. I have more confidence, and then the adjustment, like going to two concerts in a row. The last 2 days I was more tired than normal, and I had to sit there and go, why am I so tired? Why am I so drained? I got enough sleep. I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking care of myself. I'm not, I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And then it dawned on me today. I was like, oh, I'm a highly sensitive person. It's like I just put myself through too much and I just was
Yes.
depleted. So making those adjustments of like, it's okay for me to say no to something because I know I'm not like, I'm going to get tired and oversensitized with it quickly. So yeah, that's a very
Yeah.
long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, I love it. I can relate so much to what you were saying there. Like I thought it was funny with like the movies piece, like finding that message. And it's like that's such an HSP thing where we just like pick up on things and we just are like moved deeply by experiences and like art and all of that. And I think it's like one of the coolest things about being sensitive is like we just experience life in a deep way and everything in a deep way. And it's like such a gift. Like it's really cool. And also just what you were saying, yeah, about like realizing like, oh, I went to these 2 concerts and it drained me, and it's like, I think that's where we can find so much confidence in when we know about the trait, because it's like you just learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and the more that you kind of like step into like, okay, these are the boundaries I have, like this is how I kind of have to set up my day to support me, like it just feels good because again, it's like going back to like, okay, I have my own back. I know how to like make myself feel good. I'm not going to apologize to people if I don't want to go out or go to this thing because I know that it's important to take care of me in this way. And it's just like, I don't know. I just think that's so important. And I think in the past, or I don't know, I've struggled with feeling like, oh, being sensitive makes me weak because I can't do as much as other people. But like reframing it as like, no, I'm just like taking really good care of myself. And honestly, because we have to be so in touch with our needs, like I think everyone needs to be more in touch with their needs, and so
Yeah.
highly sensitive people can kind of be that beacon, like, "Hey, check in with yourself." Like, don't for any person out there, like, don't just, like, burn yourself out, like, it's good to check in with your body and what you need, and yeah, there's so much strength in it, and like you were saying too with, like, therapy and, going through everything that you've gone through, like, you just can build so much resilience and self-reliance knowing like, oh, I'm highly sensitive. I went through this stuff and like I'm fine. Like I'm here to
Yeah.
tell the story and now empower others. Like that's really cool. And always the stance I want to have for HSPs as well, is like we're not victims, like we're not weak, like we just
Mhm.
are wired differently and we can make the changes in our lives to support us. So I love all of that.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I think like, and you said something so key is having boundaries with yourself. I feel like a lot of people don't do. Like it's good to have boundaries with other people, but with yourself is like so important because I think that's how you build self-trust too. Is like, no, this is my boundary. This is what I have with myself. This is what I know is gonna work and not work. And then anytime you betray those boundaries, you kind of betray yourself a little bit, and then it kind of
Hmm.
like that like lack of self-trust just kind of goes in a circle. And it's
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's so true. And that's like what I one of the things I always share with people when they're like, "Oh, like I can witness like, oh, I can tell that you don't trust yourself." Like I always encourage people to just like do little things, like have little daily habits that are ways that you show yourself that you follow through, that you have your own back, like drinking enough water or I don't know, going for a walk every day or making your bed, like doing these little things that are like good for you, that are good for your mental health, for your physical health. Just like doing these things is like a great way to build that self trust and see like, oh, I can rely on myself. I can create that feeling of safety in my life and in my body. And that's like so much growth can happen from
Mm.
those small habits too. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be anything big or crazy.
I don't know, 100%. Being in the highly sensitive community, is there something that you're seeing right now that's new that like you're learning about where you're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know this was a thing," and that you're like just now realizing? Like, because I feel like more information comes out about highly sensitive people
Mhm.
all the time.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I'm like seeing anything new specifically with like research. Nothing comes to mind specifically, but I think something I'm asked about a lot is like people are wondering like, oh, is being highly sensitive just something that's caused by trauma or are you born with it? And I think that and people will ask, oh, is high sensitivity the same as being having ADHD? Like there's always like kind of misconceptions or confusion around things. And I think the more that it's talked about, the more there is understanding. Like, no, being highly sensitive is something that you're born with. Yes, like experiencing trauma can actually make you more sensitive for sure. Like
Mhm.
sensitivity exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it can make you more hypervigilant. It can make you more on edge. Like that makes perfect sense. But I think there is like it's becoming more and more talked about, people are understanding like what it actually is. And I'm also loving and I'm seeing more and more conversation around like regulating your nervous system. I feel like that's like everywhere right now. And that's so
Yeah.
great because that is like essential for us as highly sensitive people to have those practices to ground ourselves, like we were talking about, and like and regulate our systems. And so that's a huge conversation. Um, yeah, I mean, there's just like so much great stuff. I'm so happy that in general, there's just so much like support online in regards to mental health,
Mm.
because we all need it, especially for us as HSPs who are going to be more impacted. Like we need those tools, and there's so many great resources out there.
Oh, yes. What's a way for highly sensitive people to kind of better communicate to like the people around them, like their needs and like what they want and how to help? Like if like say for example, someone who's listening maybe has someone highly sensitive like in their lives, like what's a good way to like try to understand them from like the opposite
Mm.
side?
Yeah, I love that question. So I can give you the link to this. I actually have this guide that I created where it's like explaining high sensitivity to non-HSPs
Oh,
because I
awesome.
got asked this question so many times. People are like, "How do I explain being highly sensitive to my husband or my friends or family?" And so I created this guide. It's like a PDF, and so basically and so yeah, I'll send it to you and people can download it if they want, but
Yeah.
basically I think it's important and helpful to just like share the facts, like share the HS person website. Another thing that I think is fun to do with like the person you're sharing it with is like have them take the self test to see their score. So like an HSP, obviously my husband is not. He took the test and it's like I think he got like 12 out of 27, maybe even less, maybe 7, something low, like not an HSP, and I'm like 25 out of 27 or something. So it's like kind of like great to spark conversation, like, okay, here are the facts about it. Also like something I think is helpful is to kind of like share specific examples. So you could be like, "Hey, you know how when we were at that restaurant the other night and then it got super loud and then it was like hard for me to focus on what I was thinking about?" Like that's an example of how I get overstimulated. It's just hard for me to filter things out. So it's kind of like sharing the facts, sharing real life examples, like just like starting to like open the conversation. I think is great. And like I mean, the reality is like non-highly sensitive people, it's going to be hard for them to ever fully understand our experience. But I think if somebody is like willing to just be open and listen, like that's the
Mm.
coolest thing. Like that's awesome. I hope for more of that because HSPs are the minority. We're 15 to 20% of the population. So the majority of people are not going to ever fully personally understand our experience. But yeah, I think there are definitely some great ways we can share about it and help feel more understood.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. I think, yeah, if you send that to me, I'll put it in the link in the description of this podcast.
Mm,
People can
awesome.
download it. Yeah. That
Yeah.
way it's easy. They're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I think it's tough to, I mean, communication generally is difficult when you're a highly sensitive person and your voice sometimes has been like shoved down by yourself or like your environment. So to
Mhm.
speak up and tell people about it and know that it's okay is wonderful. I feel like there should be more safe environments to do that because there's so few
Yes.
of us in the world.
Mhm.
So yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a really like great way to explain that. So thanks.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on that too is just like it always starts with us validating ourselves. I think naturally as humans, we want other people to understand and accept us and like that's normal and good to want that. But for us, like it's important for us to validate and accept ourselves first. So it's
Mm,
like if we learn we're highly sensitive, doing that work to like understand the trait, understand ourselves, love ourselves as we are is so important because otherwise we are going to go to other people and be like, feel frustrated that people don't fully understand. And so it's like, no, when you understand and embrace yourself, you can talk to others about it and be like, yeah, I'm highly sensitive. Like, I love this about myself, or I'm learning to love this about myself. And here are the facts. Like, I think coming to it with that energy makes all the difference as well versus like, oh, feeling bad about it, whatever. So
yeah.
that's the other thing I would
Oh,
say.
that's awesome. Okay, so my last question for you is if anyone has been listening and has resonated with anything that you've talked about, what would be the advice that you give them?
Ooh, I like this question. The advice that I would give them is honestly, like, be open to learning about the trait. And I just want you to know that, like, I hope listening to this conversation has helped you feel like, oh, you're not alone because you're truly not alone. There are so many other people who have the same experience as you. And just learning about this trait and learning to embrace it can honestly change your life and open so many doors and I don't know, make life a lot more enjoyable and fun and magical. So, yeah, just know that you're not alone and you're in good company and there's so many awesome resources out there to support you.
Well, I love that. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And then lastly, do you want to tell people like where to find you on like social media and all the things?
For sure. Yeah. So I'm most active on Instagram at Life by Alissa. And then I have a website, sensitiveandsoulful.com, and I have a podcast called The Sensitive and Soulful Show. So all of that, though, you could just find through my Instagram. So yeah, lots of free resources there for you.
Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for listening. And remember, you have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.